Hi there, it's Brian Sebastian, Movie Reviews and More, the Women's Broadcast TV Network, Worldwide TV Network, IT247. And I gotta say, it's an honor and pleasure. I've never met these three girls outside of Mary, but I've known about them going back to 1980, which is something years ago. But they all look really pretty. I'm really happy and honored to have you all here. So I wanna start with this. I wanna start with Peggy first. Peggy, introduce yourself, what you're doing when you started marching.
Okay, I'm Peggy Sue Snyder Casey. Currently, I'm a band director in Westmont, Illinois at Marker School, and I also teach drumline at Downers Grove North High School. I'm a mom of 5, and most of them still live with us, so it's a very busy life. I first started marching drum corps in 1981, and then I marched 1982 also with the Phantom Regiment, and then I had to take years off to earn money for college. So there was a big gap, and then I marched 4 years of senior Drum and Bugle Corps with the Chicago Vanguard.
And what state are you in?
I'm in around Chicago suburbs.
Gisele, you're next. Tell us who you are when you started marching.
Who am I? My name is Gisele. I started marching in '75. I discovered drum corps through my sister, actually. She marched the old child lanes in the 60s, and she had to babysit me, and she would drag me to her rehearsals. I joined Child Lanes in '75, my first year on color guard, and then I switched to the drum line in '76. I marched there until '81. It was an all-girl corps from Montreal, and then I went to Crossmen in '82. And then I met my husband and moved to South Africa for 7 years, where I played percussion in an orchestra there. And when I moved back here, I started teaching, reconnecting and teaching little corps around here. And now both my children, I'm a mother of 2, both my children marched. My daughter is still marching with Carolina Crown. Well, not this year, but you know what I mean. So,
and what country are you in?
I'm in Montreal, Quebec, Canada.
Okay, Mary.
Well, okay, so I started marching in 1971. And in an all-girl feeder corps for a Class A corps called the Fire-ettes. And I marched in the Fire-ettes starting in 1973 through 1977. And then I transferred to a top 12 corps called the 27th Lancers, and I was the first female battery player in that corps. I played snare, and it was very challenging. In 1981, I went and moved to California and played with the Freelancers, Capital Freelancers, and became the first female drum section leader ever. And then after I aged out, I taught for many years. Still taught up until about 5 years ago. So yeah, that's what I do.
And what state are you in?
I'm in Washington State. Now I'm a math teacher, so.
Which is very important.
Yeah.
Kelley.
Yes. Excuse me.
Tell us how you started, when you marched, what corps, and what state or country you're in.
Well, I live in Southern California. Formerly from Northern California, where I lived most of my life until 5 years ago. And I started marching in a drum and bell corps in 1974. And drum and bell corps are kind of an offshoot of a drum and bugle corps. It's more like a feeder corps. They were very popular in Northern California, and I think there were a handful down here. So I worked my way up the ranks, started off with cymbal, played bass drum for a short time, and then played snare for most of the 5 years that I was in that. And then I went to a Class A corps from South San Francisco, California, marched in the Conquistadors for 2 years on snare. And then this certain instructor from the Blue Devils who taught their drum line and who was in their drum line for many years came up to me at a show while I was warming up with the Conquistadors and asked me what I was doing the next year. So he basically handed me a spot, and I marched with the Blue Devils on snare in '81 and '82. And I also marched in a senior corps like Peggy for many years afterwards. I mean, I was in that from 2005 through 2007. So I did take a big break from drumming. I've never taught.
What state?
That's about
are
it.
you in?
Pardon me?
What state or country are you in?
I live in Southern California.
Southern California.
Yes.
Peggy, talk about this. When you first joined that line, what was that feeling like for you when you knew you made it?
It was really something because they hadn't had a girl in the battery section since the Phantom Regiment became a top 12 corps, which was like 1974, 75.
1974, right?
Okay. So I remember, going to the camps and doing the auditions. And of course, my older brother Scott was in the corps too, so that was very helpful having somebody there that I knew. But I remember going to the camps and at Thanksgiving camp where they kind of sort people out. And I remember Marty Hurley coming up to me and just saying, Peg, I don't know what we're going to do with you. So I made the line. I was very, very happy, not surprised because I really, really worked hard. I came from a smaller town and I didn't have private drum lessons. So I didn't really know what I was doing until I got there. And, but once I got there, I practiced like an hour every night. So not surprised, very happy, but knew that I had a long way to go to, get up to the level that I needed to be at, for sure.
And Gisele, coming from Canada, I mean, that was a great all-girls corps. That means you didn't march against Mary. No, you didn't march against Mary at that point, but in general.
I actually did.
Oh, you
Yeah.
did? Okay, all right.
We were both in all-girl course when we were young.
Because here's the thing. I still love that 1973 Fire-ettes show. I thought they were underrated, but I love what they did, and I was fascinated because if I remember correctly, I think they had 3 snares. Was that right, Mary?
Yeah.
And I was fascinated by it. I'm like, well, they're really good. And I was like, I was kind of shy then. I love the American flag holder, and I just remember just watching Mary because we never talked throughout the whole thing. This is when everybody was obviously segregated, doing stuff. But I always followed her, and then she was really surprised when I kind of reached out to her, and she sent me a message one day. I'm like, I already know who you are. I've been following you since the 70s. You just didn't know. Pleasantly surprised. But talk about those competitions, because those all-girl competitions were really, really good because I admired that, and I looked forward to them because eventually you knew that you were going to go on and do something else.
Well, I didn't know at the time that I would go on and do a top 12. I was marching all girls. I met Mary. There were competitions in Quebec, and we had hosted the Fire-ettes. And, she was a drummer, we're a drummer. I don't know how exactly we met, but we started talking because we would mingle with the corps, and we were hosting the Fire-ettes. So that's where I met Mary.
Well, I'm just going to interject. Gisele and I became pen pals when we were 15 years old.
Also, yes.
Wow.
Yeah. That's it. But, back then, the competition in all girl was fierce, and those corps were good.
Yeah, they were.
I decided that I wanted to march top 12 after many years of marching chatelaines, and I there's always like this valley that goes through, it's ups and downs, and after a while you kind of, I kind of figured, well, I did what I had to do here. I think if I want to be better, if I want to get better, I need to experience something else. And so I did. I wanted my second to last year, but I'm not disappointed. I stayed with the DCI being in Montreal that year and stuff. That was good. And then I went to Crossmen, not speaking English very well, and being their first female on the snare line too was challenging. But this is something I had to do. I just needed that challenge at that point.
So Kelley, talk about, so you went from Southern California to Northern California, is that right?
Just the opposite.
Oh, so Northern to Southern, okay.
Yeah, I never took in any drum corps in Southern California. So mainly, I lived all my life in Northern. So I The transition from, say, a Drum and Bugle Corps to a Class A Corps to a top 12 drumline was very smooth because that was a 9-year period. So I had several instructors from either the Vanguard or the Blue Devils, and I took lessons here and there. And so I had many years to excel at the snare drum, my preferred instrument. And I just lived and breathed the snare drumming. That's what I did. So the transition for me was quite smooth from drum corps to drum corps. And I never had any confrontations or any unfortunate experiences with somebody, being a woman in a snare line or a drum line. I was very fortunate. I had one experience, but that was short-lived, and I just decided not to march in that certain corps.
Which segues to Mary at that point. We talked last week about you, how young you were, going from Norwich, driving up to Massachusetts. Tell that story, and then ending up in that line, which became iconic.
Yeah, so the Fire-ettes broke up after 1977, and there was a group of us that were trying to figure out where we were going to land. And we went to several different drum corps practices, surfers, Connecticut Classics, and we went all over the place trying to figure out where we were going to land. And we heard that 27th Lancers were holding auditions and had some spots, and so we went up and started going to the Sunday rehearsals. And so I went up there, and I was 16 years old. I had no business even being there, at all. And but I went, and who was it that said Peg? I put myself to work. I hired someone to help coach me, and I practiced at least an hour or more a day. And me sitting down with my my metronome and my pad, and I put myself to work, and I kept being in the line and kept being in the line. And there were literally cuts up until like the second or third show in 27th snare line. Like, they were still cutting people, and I just kept being there. And I don't even know how, but I just kept being there. And I was so thankful, but I also knew that it was because I was working so hard to try to do it. I did experience a lot of difficulty being the first girl in that snare line. It was hard, but I stayed for 3 years. So yeah.
How emotional was that for Gisele and Mary to be like that with those lines? Maybe they probably didn't want to have you there because you were a girl. It's like, being the first minority going to an all-white school in a way. Who did you guys hang out to? Who could you relate to? Because no one really knew what it was like to be in your bodies.
Oh, Brian, I didn't really relate to many people. I didn't speak English. So
not only did you have a language barrier, you had another barrier. You were a woman, and was it a line also?
Sorry?
Was it an all male?
Oh yeah. Yep.
So you had two disadvantages.
I'm not sure if not speaking English very well was that much of a disadvantage, because there's a lot of things I know were being said that I couldn't really understand. And so it was easier for me to ignore, They weren't extremely mean. I think the big thing for me, so at the beginning, yes, there are some people that came to me and said, we never had a girl in our line. We don't want a girl in our line. Just pack up, go home. But like Mary and Peggy said, I persisted. I practiced, and I showed up, and I kept being there. And people would rotate. And at one point, they didn't rotate me anymore. I was not told you made the line. They just brought us to the gym at the end of one camp. I had a snare on me, and Tom Hannum at the time just said, well, we want to present to you the 1982 battery line of the Crossmen. And I was standing there with a drum. That's how I found out. I can understand how they would have been reticent. A lot of those guys had been playing together for years. The bass line was the same bass line for 3 consecutive years, for instance.
Wow.
So it's kind of threatening, when you have to adapt to a female drummer. So I can understand some of those statements. The big thing for me, though, was that I felt the need to constantly prove myself. I needed to prove that I can play. I needed to prove that I had resistance. I needed to prove that I could spend days on the field, not going to the bathroom, for instance, where the guys, could. So that was the big challenge for me. And up to a point where Tom Adam had us do an exercise, a very simple, back then, all the girls here did it, I'm sure. We used to just march and roll, like tracks. And the field we were practicing on was not an even field. It was really bad. So we were rolling and marching. And then at one point, Tom Adam stopped us and made us do individually, One great advantage I had at Chatelain's was that we marched very well. And my basics were great. That's, we played basics, and my first instructor.
You were excellent marchers. You women really.
Excellent marchers, and I had great basics. That's how I got in that line. It's not because I'm a spectacular player. I'm not. But I'm a solid player, and I'm a good listener. So we did it individually, and then at one point, it's my turn, and I do it, and Tom Adam just told me, hey, you go back and you do it again. And then he told the guy, look at this. This is what I want. She's marching well and she's rolling well. Those were my best features. And from then it was easier, for me. I felt more accepted. And after a while, they got very protective, actually. So.
Peggy, Mary, and Kelley, you went from slings to harnesses. Was it hard for you? How was that feeling like?
Well, slings separated our boobs. And harnesses, the first harnesses just smashed them.
I didn't think about that.
That's how it was. They just smashed them down. So, they were not really meant for
Women.
females. They weren't meant for females. But, whatever.
So did you have to put pads in there? Is that what you did eventually?
Oh yeah, there was foam on the inside of my harness because it wasn't meant for a person with boobs.
Yeah.
And it's not like you could go and complain where you were either, could you?
No. Well, in 27th, we had the harnesses that we first had were just stripped down the middle. So that wasn't so bad. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That was bad for me. I don't know about your boobs, Mary, but that's not good. That brought a lot of remarks for me.
Oh,
yeah. Splitting them up. Yep.
So Peggy and Kelley, you guys didn't have that problem, or did you have that problem? Because harnesses came for you guys.
I was a lot skinnier then, so I didn't have as much of a problem. And, if you just wear a tube top, it just keeps you compact anyway. We didn't have the T-bars. We had these molded black, I don't even know what brand they were, but it really was not that bad for me. Playing bass drum with the 2 straps, that was not a lot of fun because it smashed the drum right up against you.
Right.
But how about you, Kelley?
Yeah, I remember in 1980 is when I made that transition. So in 1979, Conquistadors, we had the strap. We wore our drums, I think everybody did in those days, excessively high. I do not know how the guys did it. But they were very high, but the harnesses allowed you to have a little more leeway on how high or low you were going to wear your drums. For me, I just remember being in so much pain. It was about a few months after we transitioned to the harnesses, which were not the T harnesses. And I just had a lot of shoulder pain and that, but eventually, like Peggy said, and I didn't have the boob problem, but look out there. But, eventually you just adapt,
Yeah, in California, we had those Hadley carriers. So a man named Hadley had developed these white sort of, I don't even know what the material was, these carriers that all California Corps had. And that's what I was talking about. It was like this big shield in front of your body that smashed you. And they were not comfortable at all.
Wow. I want everybody to give their social media links and what you're doing now, and then I'm going to end this because I'm going to do a part 2 because we got about 4 minutes. So starting with Peggy, give your social media links if you want people to reach out to you.
No, I don't really have any social media links.
Ah,
Not about that.
Gisele?
Well, the only social media, social media? No, I mean, it's my Facebook. People can find me. I'm not worried about that. I mean, I have my company if you guys need a virtual assistant, but I mean, other than that, you know.
Give us whatever you'd like to give us.
No, people find me. It's all good.
Well,
All right, last thing, so what's your Facebook?
My Facebook is Gisele Montreal Cadieux. Yeah.
Okay, Mary and Kelley.
And of course, there's the Chicks with Sticks Facebook page as well.
Yes.
That's true. That's true.
See,
Yeah.
that's what I was asking.
Yes.
There you
Reach
go.
out to us on Chicks with Sticks on Facebook.
And then
And I have my personal Facebook, Mary Gromko Murray. Kelley.
Kelley?
Yes, I think Facebook is a wonderful option. So you can find me at the Kelley Kubitz, just Kelley Marie Kubitz, actually. And then if somebody wants to reach out there and wants to be more in touch with me or the group, we can certainly provide my email address or phone number if it goes in that direction. So yes, Facebook would be the best for me as well.
So on this part 1, I want to thank Peggy, Mary, Kelley, and Gisele. I'm going to end it with this because they're so fascinating and I love hearing the stories. We're going to come back with a part 2 on how they all met and what it was like to be on the road and what food they ended up eating and what it was like to be in those buses, because we all have torture stories of us traveling in the bus. But it's like, Peggy's like, no, I didn't have any childhood. I had a great time. So we're going to find out. So I'm going to end this with this. This is Brian Sebastian, Movie Reviews and More, the Women's Broadcast TV Network, Worldwide TV Network, iTunes 247. We'll be right back.